started, try to stay on time here. We got 2 hours, but I'm hopeful that we won't need all of that. Welcome to the members of the steering committee. Thank you so much for attending. Figured it was about time that we get together again, talk about the status of the project, but also get some direction, some perspective from the steering committee on a couple of the properties that are associated with this total project. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the PowerPoint presentation. Someone showed me how to do this. Hold on a second. Is that it?
Then full screen.
And then, beg pardon?
Then full screen.
Full screen? Oh, yes, right. It's right here. Okay. So, wanted to let you all know that the contractors, the project has actually definitely been going forward. A lot of dirt work going out on the project. You wouldn't recognize it from the way it looked when the project started. And we actually have a slideshow here. See if I can find it. This is a flyover. It's even got cool music. I want to thank Garver for providing that show for us with a drone flyover. Thank you. Oops, don't want to do that. I want to advance it. How do I advance it? Okay, there we go. The agenda today, we're going to talk about the property on 13th, also known as the Midian Shrine Hoskin Edition property. There's a few questions that we want to put to y'all and get some perspective, some direction on that one. Also want to talk about the storage unit property that's going to actually be part of the site proper. The site down on the 13th will be used for the power substation that provides power to this facility. Then we also wanted to have the design builder take a little time and let you know what's been going on. They've been very busy, a lot of progress been made, and so this is an opportunity for them to give you an update from their perspective. And then we want to talk about the update on the project financing and schedule. So let's talk about the 13th Street, or the Midian Shrine Hoskin Edition property. We actually acquired the property, and it was for the purposes of putting a substation, an Evergy substation, in siting it so that we can run a power line from there underground to the treatment plant facility itself. It'll be a dedicated substation. The line will be underground, so it'll be very hardened, very protected against failure. And that was all part of the idea of making the water treatment plant, which is a critical facility, making it as reliable as possible. The location was recommended by the committee, and from that recommendation followed council approval for acquisition and the purchase. Two considerations that were made at that time was the specific location of the substation on the property and lake access. Those were concerns that have been brought up, and those are things that we want to talk about today. And then also to talk about the conditional use that's with the planning group that we're going to need to get associated with the project. That's work that we still have to do. So what we're talking about is this long property that stretches north and south. As you can see, to the east is a lake as part of the Spinnaker Cove neighborhood. And then it's also on the other side, the Country Acres. And it's a piece of unimproved property. There's a 75-foot reserve on what we're talking about, we're considering is a 75-foot reserve on the east side of the property. There's an existing 150-foot Evergy transmission easement that's going along there. There have been concerns and complaints from the Spinnaker Coves property that people have been trespassing off of this property onto their lake, and it's their lake basically. So one of the notions that we had was, well, what if we gave 75 feet of that, a strip of that property, 75 feet of it, to Spinnaker Cove, then they could put up and maintain a fence. They could also make whatever attempts they wanted to enforce non-trespassing efforts in the area. And that way, we don't get put into a position where we're trying to enforce that. We're trying to respond to the concerns that they have. And there never was access to the lake from this property. So it's not as though we'd be giving up access. There never was access. This strip that we're talking about is a way for them to assume that responsibility to protect the access to their own lake. One of the concerns that we did hear early on was, well, wait a minute, if we wanted to make this a park, wouldn't we want to have access to the lake? Like I said, their access was never part of this property. So that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about with y'all today. And we can either pause now if you like, and then talk about the placement of the substation, or we can talk about both issues at the same time. Do you want to pause now and talk about this 75-foot strip first?
Yeah, I do. So we were talking about that bar right there on the east side.
That long piece right here on the east side.
That's
right.
west side. So you have two vertical lines there. There's one on the east and then there's one on the west.
So it's the distance between the two.
Okay.
That's the 75 foot.
And so the one on the east is in the water?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at where the actual property line is.
Okay. So one concern is someone who lives on a sand bottom lake, and with prevailing south winds, you get a lot of erosion. How does that line then fit if they did put a fence along the western edge and the erosion happens? And how does is that still their responsibility then?
Yes, the erosion in the lake, preservation of the property that the fence was built on, the condition of the fence, all of that would be theirs. That would be one of the advantages of this approach, is that we could extricate ourselves from that responsibility.
So what is the cost? Because you said give. So are we giving, or will we be selling them that easement?
Well, we could. We're looking for direction from you all for it, because, and I'm not an attorney, but because this is property, you have to have some consideration. So I think we at least have to ask $1 in consideration of the property. We bought the whole piece of property for $600,000. We could take a cost per square foot and ask them for that cost if that's the direction we get from you folks. I can tell you that it wouldn't take very many years if we were to be responsible for improvements along there to keep trespassers out of a lake from our property. Wouldn't take very many years to accumulate to more than whatever purchase price we'd be asking for here. So selfishly, from my perspective, we're probably saving ourselves money in the long run if we were to give it to them for as least amount that we would be allowed, which would be $1, I believe. But it's a policy issue that would very much benefit from the steering committee's weigh-in at this point.
I mean, just before making an official decision, I would like to see what that dollar amount is, square foot wise, for that piece of property.
Sure.
And then looking at ongoing maintenance, I know that can get pretty expensive. If there's any estimates, just to kind of show that. And again, just being transparent as well.
Would that include the initial cost of building the fence?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. So, Bill, can you come up with those numbers? The cost per square foot at the purchase price, 600,000 for the entire property for this amount, and then the initial cost of the fence, and then estimated ongoing maintenance costs, and we can get that to y'all.
thank you.
So you also alluded to the next step in this being a conditional use permit for the location of the plant itself, correct?
And change of use too, because you have,
Change.
it's not just, it's a matter of being able to get the necessary permission and zoning to be able to cite the.
So it's currently zoned SF5, I'm guessing.
I believe it's, single family, yeah.
And what's the distance for petition from the site to the
200
next
feet.
closest residential? What's the
200 feet.
minimum?
200 feet.
200 feet. So maybe you should show us where you're thinking about putting this as it relates to where it falls within the homeowners on both sides. Because that might be a determination if we anticipate pushback.
Sure. The blue, light blue rectangle at the very top of the screen at the north end of the property, that's where we were contemplating locating it at. It still allows access along the side of it. See that triangular piece just to the west of it?
Uh-huh.
This triangular piece up here? That also belongs to the city.
Right.
So there's room to actually put a access road into the property if that were to be built someday. But the other thing that it does too is it minimizes the cost of putting that power plant or that power substation there, and reduces the length of the run that you'd have to get it out to the street and then run it along the street underground to the Northwest Water Treatment Plant. So when you look at total costs, that's probably the most economic location for it.
And how many homes are within that 200 feet radius of that site? And percentage of the total is something I'd want to know.
So we'll go ahead and look at a 200-foot radius and get a count.
Right. And what that percentage would be if there was protest.
So what percentage within 200 feet would pull the trigger on protest?
Right. You understand what I'm asking? Okay. Because I would hope that that might be a consideration if we ended up not asking for purchase, but asking, we're going to deed this Reserve A, but you can't
Right,
protest against it.
right.
So, I mean, just something to think about. And that only impacts to the east, not to the west, but,
Right.
and again, if you go way down south at that other tan spot, is that a
Down here.
option B?
Big pardon?
Is that an option B for location of it?
Yeah, you can run it down. You can locate it further south in the property. You just drive the costs up by doing
Right.
that.
But it wouldn't have to be buried underground at that point, correct? Because it would just be.
Would it be, would the transmission be above ground?
Up to 13th, and then from 13th on, it'd be underground?
So it could be way in that stretch.
Because you already have high transmission lines there along that stretch.
I think one of the things that, if I remember correctly, Bill, was they wouldn't use the existing infrastructure. They would create new infrastructure. So you'd be adding to the number of transmission lines that would be visible to the property to
But
the
no,
east.
no additional poles.
I believe you'd have,
You would?
yeah, whole new tower, whole new poles, whole new infrastructure.
12 kV is the separate infrastructure than the 138 kV.
Okay.
So that was one of the things, thinking that to try to be good neighbors, maybe put it underground, and then, of course, the longer you run it underground, the higher the
I'm
cost.
afraid that cost is going to be way too high. So,
Would you like to see what those costs are as part of your decision-making, sir?
I suppose we should have it.
Okay.
I'd rather have more information than not enough.
Then we'd also have to add the cost of the road, too.
True.
But I mean,
Service.
those are all associated costs, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Alan, is that, when everybody's talking about everything's underground, is the vaults and everything underground? You're not gonna have any transmission, incoming lines? It's gonna be on poles or within the substation?
There's an existing transmission line now in that 150-foot easement running along that property. It's hard to see or you can't see. So there's existing lines there now. It would drop off of that line to this substation. The substation infrastructure itself is above ground.
Above ground, yeah.
Right, and
Just
then it
wanna
would
make
dive
sure everybody's
underground.
aware that there is above ground structure in a
Yes,
substation
yes.
that people will see
Yeah.
right there. Yeah.
Any idea how large?
How many acres?
Well, no, height-wise.
Oh, do you have a sense of that?
So it'd be, their standard fence is either 6-foot or 8-foot masonry fence, and I think inside there, the actual bus bars, I think they're 10 feet high.
Okay.
You got to Stearman out at, where Stearman, we installed it there just south of Boeing's property. You can kind of get an idea what the size of it is. It's probably about 40 feet in the air,
This isn't 40 feet in the air, right?
30, 40 feet.
The bus bars?
The bus bars, not the bus bars, but the tower that comes in.
Well, this is becoming from an existing tower.
Yeah,
The poles to bring the power down from the existing.
yeah.
Would it look like the substation at Innovation Campus?
Be very similar, yeah.
Okay, so that's not too big at all, really.
So we'll provide this additional information, barring any real concerns that come from your evaluation of that information. Are we on the right track? Does this seem to be an approach that upon further consideration could be considered, or is this something that you just want us to find a different way, a different approach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I want the city to be responsible for maintenance and keeping people out of that lake. If it's their lake, they should be the ones responsible for it. I mean, I think that issue was happening before the city acquired the property. So if that's what they want to keep protected, then they should be responsible for it.
And Alan, could I just ask, on your map, what's the rectangle at the bottom, that polygon at the bottom, and then the two, just maybe explain the two green arrows that say dedicated park and drainage?
So the triangle property up at the north, that's the dedicated park and drainage property. That triangle piece there, this, I don't know if you can see it very easily. This right here is the dedicated park and drainage property, but it could be used for an access road to get down into the property. This, same thing here, dedicated park and drainage property here. This is the site itself, this line here, it defines the property that we acquired. So there's a property down here that's next to it, there's a property up here that's next to it, and then this rectangle down here, I believe that's as further south we could locate the site. If you wanted to move it as far south as property, that's where it would be.
It's just an option. So, I mean, you're not really gonna, are you really gonna put a park way down there on the south end? There's no road or anything in there, is it? Or, I mean, do you want people that far into the neighborhood?
Well,
Or,
that would be a decision that would not necessarily be, it would be a project, if it was under consideration, it would be a project that wouldn't be part of these improvements. This is for the water treatment plant. The property would be acquired, the substation would be sited and built. That would be the extent of this project. But we want to make sure that we don't close any doors on future improvements to the property. So we want to make sure that we site this substation in a place that you can still get access past it for a road, for example, if you did want to put something in here, a pocket park or something like that. Also, we want to look at the possibility of connectivity of walking paths and bike paths. So if there's ever a desire sometime to put something north-south through there, we want to make sure that there's a necessary access for that. None of those improvements are contemplated currently as part of these improvements. We're talking about acquisition of the property, while we're doing the preliminary stuff with the planning and what have you, conditional use permit, we also address the concern by the adjacent property owners with access to the lake. And then we get a final determination that that's where, in fact, the site's going to be, is at the north end there.
Well, I think we're on the right path. I just wanted the numbers so we knew.
We'll absolutely get those numbers to you. Okay, is there any more discussion on this? We'll get the follow-on information to you and to the other members of the steering committee. Okay,
So, I'm sorry, one
Yes.
quick, just to make sure I understand. The substation itself would be surrounded by a concrete wall of some sort, or would it just be, I mean, is it required to be concrete? 6 foot?
So we're not required, the standard that Evergy uses and planned here would be a concrete wall with a block look on the inside.
And that'd be 6 feet?
It's either 6 feet or 8 feet, I believe it's 8 feet.
Okay. Just clarify that for us as well. And then
yes,
what's the size of that pad,
okay.
roughly?
What's the size of the property itself, the site itself?
It's a little over an acre, it's roughly 300 by 150. roughly.
Okay.
Have we got anything that we could also include that looks like what this would look like? Another substation that we could take a picture of?
Oh, the exterior, yes.
So that someone gets a sense of, well, what does that look like? And I think one of the reasons for the concrete structure, even though it's a little more expensive, I mean, the purpose, of course, is to keep the site secure, right? You don't want
Right.
people wandering into high voltage. But the other aspect of it is it's within a neighborhood. And so you want to have some.
Right, and that's where I was heading with this. I mean, obviously for those homeowners, as well as all the traffic that
Mhm.
goes along 13th, I think it needs to be something that would be pleasing
Mhm.
and not look like a gulag or something with, razor wire all over it. I'd like it to be something that looks somewhat attractive, without it just being utilitarian.
So Bill, make sure you delete the razor wire. I'm smiling under here, I know you
Yeah,
can't tell.
yeah.
So going back to what Councilmember Johnson mentioned on that, the issue, that's a very similar wall over here.
Okay. But let's take a picture of it and bring it back as part of this follow-on information, so you have a sense of what it looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I know the purpose of what it is, and it's hard to get around it, but something that's gonna fit within the surroundings. I think we have a responsibility with that as well.
And just so that you know, I've had some contact with the homeowners association representative. I don't know if he's the actual president or chairman or just a representative about this issue, who has brought the complaint about us. And like Councilmember Fry said, this is a problem they had before this was acquired, purchased by the city. It's been an ongoing problem. In talking with him, he was very agreeable and open to the idea of having a strip dedicated to them and them assuming the responsibility and costs associated with maintaining that
Awesome.
exclusion. So it's not like they're gonna hear about it for the first time.
Right.
Okay, anything else?
One last question. At the
Yes, sir.
very far southern tip, it looks like there's a road or a bridge or something from our property over to, right there. What is that?
That's some kind of a gate, isn't it?
It's an old footbridge.
Mhm.
It belongs to Spinnaker Coves. A lot of the decking was missing off of it. It is an old footbridge.
Is there also some kind of a fence or gate there as well?
Yeah, it's fenced off.
Yeah. One of the complaints is people are sneaking underneath there. Well, that's nothing we have control over. And
Right.
one of the things we did pass on to them was, well, that's your fence, your problem, and they didn't seem to have a
I
problem with
guess I was
that.
just wanting to make sure it wasn't an access point onto the Midian Shrine Hoskin addition, that it was not a emergency road or any type of other access that is granted, that if they end up Reserve A, fence that off, they're not gonna get any access. I just wanna make sure that that's removed from any consideration.
So
So it's not a
let's,
safety issue or anything.
let's work with Philbrook and verify that, okay, Bill? That's a valid concern. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. This is very helpful direction so that we can proceed with this. So this is a picture, kind of a close-up of it, if you will. It shows the cross-hatching up here where the site would be. And then you actually have some elevations here, don't you, Bill, that shows what the site looks like from the road. So as you can see, it's just kind of, you can see the lake over here. As you can see, it's just unimproved property. And then see these big towers here? Those are the towers that are there now that convey the high voltage lines. And they go on into Sedgwick County Park across north of 13th. So they're already there. It's not as though we'll be adding transmission lines that the property owners would be upset about. Those are existing transmission lines. And then this is what the actual site would look like. It'd have access off of 13th, there'd be a U-drive through it, and then this is the infrastructure that would be in it. And then we talk about the 75-foot Reserve A. So let's go ahead and change gears here now and talk about the self-storage property up right adjacent to and now part of the site. We acquired the property. There were some real advantages for doing that. We acquired it and we're talking about a purchase price of $6.2 million. That seems like a really high number, but we actually put together a list of the costs that we avoid by acquiring this property and the advantages of it. And when you look at the total costs that you avoid and when you look at the total benefits, this became a viable acquisition for us. And so we acquired the property. This property will actually be included in the Northwest Water Treatment Plant site. It reduces significantly the cost of the pipeline, where you'd have to run the pipeline, because you need that raw water, one of the ones that come from the well field north of town and from Cheney west of town. Those lines have to make their way to the water treatment plant. Those are the raw water supply lines that have to feed the plant, if you will. And there's significant cost reductions in using this property. You avoid some of those pipeline costs. The other thing that it does too is it significantly reduces the amount of earthwork that needs to be done on the total project by using this site. And finally, it puts the administration building, the lab building, closer to the process instead of out further in the site, and it makes it more central to the traveling public as far as being able to see it right off the street and drive into it. We were looking at having some public education and outreach efforts associated with that lab building for our public, and so that makes that possible. It would require a conditional use permit, and so that's, just want to, full disclosure, like the other property, we're going to have to go through that process to get the next to get that property used for this treatment plant. And we also, just again for full disclosure, the Cox property, you know how we swapped with them, the Cox property. There's some work to be done there too. So there'll be three efforts that we'll be making associated with zoning. So there's also costs associated with this property because, and here's the location of the property too. You have existing tenants there. And so there are laws and regulations that, especially when you have federal funding associated with the project, which we do, it's the WIFIA, the EPA money, that protect people in situations like this. And so we need to follow those guidelines and relocating those customers, those tenants, if you will, to a different property. And the property owner's been very cooperative in helping come to an arrangement where he will help us do that. And that's all included in the total project costs. And moving these people to a different site. Eventually this site will be cleared, the buildings will be torn down, raised, And this will become part of the total project here. Total project here, this is the Cox property here, the existing site and a new site. One of the advantages also of being able to move our administration and lab building from where it was planned on being over here to moving it over to here is now we have additional property that we can expand this treatment plant into as conditions change, requirements change. We have real estate to be able to add to our process. Doesn't sound maybe like it's real important today, but we're trying to take the long view on this. And so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, there may be the need for us to add some additional treatment processes and infrastructure. What this approach does is it makes sure that we have the necessary real estate to be able to do something like that.
Hey, Alan, I've got probably a weird question, but when we clear that site, do we scrap any of that stuff and get money savings back or anything?
I don't know. That's a great question. Is there any salvage associated with that? Is there any? Do we get a couple $1 million for salvage? Not to put you on the spot or
Scrap
anything.
metal, we're all gonna show up and truckloads.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, Brian.
I think the condition of the material by the time it's demolished is gonna be the question. So
Yeah.
it's not any value at all. But certainly any opportunity is gonna be explored, but it's difficult to salvage that sort of structure
Okay,
and retain value.
it's just a random question.
That's actually a good question, and I got to tell you, you know, I'm not being paid for this comment, but my experience so far with Wichita Water Partners is if they can find some cost savings, they are open and willing to help us benefit from those cost savings. And so, if they find, for example, that they have a buyer for storage roll-down doors or something, and they can come up with some money for that. They would not be offended if we asked for a share of those proceeds, and they have been very cooperative with us. They are good partners. They
Awesome.
really are. So, but that's a very good point. We'll make sure that we look to see how many millions of dollars you guys can cut us a check for. So, just saying.
You think in Storage Wars, they're gonna find something inside?
There you
it?
go. Oh, now there you go. So this is the site, and this is what we're talking about. Now, you look at the actual rendering of what the site is gonna look like. You can see where the storage units are here, and this is where the facilities, you know, what we're building, this is what they look like, to give you some sort of a sense of that. So as you can see, it uses a lot of the site. It's a water treatment plant like this uses a lot of real estate. This really kind of limits what it is, how you can use this property. Obviously, you could fill it in, but that's very expensive. So having some property over here and some here is definitely an advantage for us because we can't predict the future on what sorts of processes are going to be needed to meet regulatory requirements in the future. And let's see, this shows where the administrative building and the parking lot will be located in this new use of this facility. Now, the orange diagonal, isn't that the, is that the bike path?
That's the property that's being acquired as part of the bike path project, off of this.
Do you mind going up and show Tell Point and as you're describing the different pieces and what they are?
Oh, yes.
Since Alan's driving the PowerPoint, if you were at the map, that might be pretty helpful.
So
No, I'm
this,
saying just, sometimes it's hard to follow. Is this being televised? Where'd she go? Are we recording it?
I believe it is being televised.
So if it's being recorded, it might be easier if you used your finger
Oh, okay.
so that people could see it on the,
Okay, so, yeah, so there's a proposed bike path, to go up Hoover Road. I'm sorry, proposed bike path to go up Hoover Road, and, there was gonna need to be some, property acquisition as part of that project, and that's one of the things that, Alan's wanting to ask, that we're wanting to ask about this project is, the timing of that bike path, because of the driveways and pipeline work that's gonna have to happen out here along Hoover, so we want to ask about that. This hatched area around north and east sides of the property, that's part of the pipeline savings, the pipeline reroute. So we had a pipeline that was going to be coming over across through the zoo, but now with this property, we're able to come down on the property, and that was part of that pipeline savings, was to be able to use that property. The pink box, it's not a perfect footprint, but it's roughly the size and shape of the admin lab building. And then the dark areas are this is all just a concept. There's a lot of different concepts that have been floating for this site. That's general, that's one concept of it. The red is fencing, again, just a concept to be able to give us a double gate for security for fencing. What else to point out? That's all I have to point out.
Okay. So the goldenrod is the bike path.
The bike path, yeah, this is actually property to be, there's a 10-foot strip of property from this lot that's needed for the bike path, even though the bike path will be out in the right of way.
Okay.
But because of the way the ditch and some other infrastructure is there, they needed some additional room to get the bike path built.
Got it.
And we don't have a problem with that so long as the time works for the project. We don't,
Right.
as long as they can accommodate our project schedule, we don't have a problem with that property being used for that purpose. Just wanted to let y'all know about that.
And so right now you're showing 2 driveways and both off of Hoover. No driveway into the facility off of 21st? Or is this just one of multiple designs we're gonna look at?
Well, we don't have multiple to show you here today.
Okay.
Really, there's just been some different concepts thrown on paper. As far as the driveway off of 21st Street, that is possible. The main reason, I guess, that this concept keeps everything down here on Hoover is just trying to keep the parking close to the building, and there wasn't anything to go up that far, just trying to use the closest routes, basically.
And gate access onto the site close to the building.
Right.
This will be a secure site once it's built.
So part of this facility, as you'll recall, was a recommendation for a large meeting room, public space. And that public space is down here where basically the back can have some view of the facility, and also to allow that to be one step into the security for our staff that work out of this building. They're going into the plant quite often. But yeah, there's a lot of concepts. We're bringing this concept basically to ask for input.
So-
There are some things that we do look at, so we're trying to make sure that we keep distances for trucks to be able to turn around and get through security, some different things like that. But in general, we're looking for what input you have to how this might be look better.
So are you generally just asking, should we do the bike path at the same time as this?
So the question about the bike path basically is, would it be okay for this section of bike path to from 21st Street down to railroad tracks to possibly wait a year and a half until this project, which all our partners can get some construction done in this area. It wouldn't fall in with the rest of the bike path project, but we'd hate to see that bike path get built and then get torn up. So that's the reason asking about the timing of the bike path.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine with waiting. It doesn't make sense to build something new and then tear it up and rebuild it. But I defer to Councilmember Fry on that.
It's actually in Vice Mayor Claycombe's district.
Oh, yeah, that is right.
So I suppose could you put a temporary hard-packed gravel that is a lot less expensive, but it still has access?
Sure, like that.
I mean, it still makes the connection, but it wouldn't be concrete, but if it was something that would be a lot less expensive to tear up
Yeah.
when the time comes. Unless it's just gonna be in the way. I guess that's another concern.
Yeah, it might be more about people,
Yeah,
people using it. It's only a year and a half.
right.
Like that. They can wait.
Could we,
You know what I mean? 'Cause you don't want people on it.
No, I get that, yeah.
Construction site.
yeah. But to that point, could we maybe reach out to the vice mayor and see what she thinks? And
With the proper notice, maybe we can, let people know what we're doing and why, but it will draw attention that we have this bike path and that there's a portion of it that will not be completely released.
Yeah.
What is the city doing? There's a bike path that goes somewhere and starts.
So what about on the west side of Hoover from 21st down? Is there easement that it could be put on that side if it crossed over?
So from what I understand from the engineering firm that's working on the project is there's some issues with the road right away. I don't know all the details, but
Where railroad right away?
yeah.
Yeah, I get that. But, okay.
I'm not saying it can't be done.
Yeah, man, I just
Conveying
suppose
what
answer the question, if it's, what does it look like if it was over there?
Right.
really quickly, I just received a note that asked if we all could speak into the microphones for the audience that watching.
I got the same note. Thank you, Megan.
She walked off.
Yeah, I suppose if it came at that northeast corner of 21st and Hoover, crossed over to the southeast corner, and then back over to the southwest corner, and then down the path, that takes it out of consideration over on the east side. But, yeah, I understand the railroad right-of-way issue. I guess it's just look at it.
Is that a active railroad?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the B&O?
Yeah.
K&O, thank you. Yeah, it's at least twice a day.
Okay.
And then north of the parking lot would just be open green space that would be held for future consideration, or?
Yes, sir. There's a big part of it is actually there's some pipeline easement for some cross-country petroleum pipelines. But yes, it'd be green space.
But because underneath it is pipeline easement, it has to stay that way. Is
You
what I'm
wouldn't want to
hearing.
build a
That
building
portion,
over it,
yes.
for
Yeah.
example. That's what you're asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I guess my last question on the bike path is going, I believe that's south at the bottom of it. Is it gonna go around the fence line?
Where does it go, Bill?
So it basically just parallels the road and crosses. Sorry. So the plan right now is that the bike path would basically just parallel across and go across the road and tie into this bike path, existing bike path right in this area. Just go across.
Will you have any national security concerns with a bike path that close to that facility?
It's one of those things that we look at, because it's not out someplace, and there's neighborhoods and traffic and all the rest, we have to build the site. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to speak.
All right. Sorry about that. Because of its location anyway, with road traffic, being close to neighborhoods, we have to take into consideration safety concerns, security concerns anyway.
Okay.
And so that won't significantly change with the bike path.
Okay.
So we'll have barriers, we'll have detection, we'll have cameras, and some secret things that I can't tell you right now.
G14 classified.
But your fence is back there on the red. I mean, your
Two-
fence is protecting. the
Yeah, there's
whole-
two fences there.
The critical infrastructure has a fence between it and the bike path.
Yes, yep.
So along those lines, if your two red lines here are your security fences, and the one on the west at the southern delivery access drive, is there enough queuing space there that you're not gonna have deliveries backed up onto the roadway? Do you ever envision that there would be times where you'd have them stacked up and it would be coming out onto Hoover? Is that wide enough, long enough, I should say?
So
I know we're probably obsessing over this, but that's what you had this committee for.
No, so queuing space, there should be plenty of queuing space.
Okay.
There are certain deliveries that will probably still come in off of 21st Street and come in a different way into the site. But for the deliveries that would come in here, basically there's enough room for 2 semis between that first fence and the road. So that was basically what was used there.
I guess that's kind of why I was asking earlier if there was another access from 21st to get into the site for deliveries. Either on the other eastern side of Cox Machine,
Right.
coming down into it, or if this was going to be our only access site into the plant.
Right, Councilmember. Yeah, there is a second entrance up there that would be
Okay.
east of what would ultimately be.
So in
Cox
those
Machine.
times where there would be a lot of queuing or stacking, that might be, you have 2 points to get in.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Is it fuel or chemicals for the others access?
So it's mainly for chemicals. So we have certain deliveries that they don't want to cross railroad tracks. So they want to come in like off of K-96 and come down. They don't want to be in any situation, especially with the railroad tracks and the weird intersections here with railroad tracks. They don't want those chemicals there.
So those are chemical deliveries,
There will be chemical deliveries.
but that's what that one would be used for.
Is the other entrance, yes.
And are those much heavier, or is it just the nature of the chemicals, or what's the
It's
concern?
the nature of the chemicals and the railroad tracks.
So then I guess the question is Hoover and West Street strong enough to handle all of that extra traffic? And that's a different situation than the plant. That's more of a road infrastructure question long-term, but are we confident that those roadways are going to be able to hold up to all of that?
And I probably can't fully answer that, but I know the number of solid waste vehicles that go up and down West Street. Pretty confident it'll be okay with what we have deliveries coming down.
And having 2 accesses to a site is important too. Okay. Any more attempts to stump the staff? You guys are doing really good. You guys 10, staff 0. So. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Wichita Water Partners. They've prepared a presentation to give you a sense of what they've been doing. They've been very busy. And how do I get out of this, Bill? Yes, please.
Bill, are you able to see our screen?
Yes, Dave, yes.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Bill, Alan, thanks for letting us present what we've been doing over the last several months. And just for those of you who haven't met me or don't recall, my name's Dave Kinchin, and I'm the project director for the joint venture. And so today we're going to talk briefly about the progress of the project. We're going to talk a little bit about public communication and engagement. That'll be Megan Jansen. And then Brian Meyer is going to talk to us about some of the business opportunities that we're seeing from the project as we look forward and advance the project. So first thing we'll talk about is just key milestones on the schedule. So this is a summary schedule that is representative of what will ultimately be about 2,500 activities on the schedule. A very complex schedule, a lot of work to be done. This is primarily a roll-up of what we've been doing or what we're doing in phase 2A, and if you'll recall, that was the limited notice to proceed. One of the key areas of focus is supporting the city with the SRF loan, which is scheduled to be closed sometime in the early fall. And then we've got 2 primary construction packages that we're developing now. Package 1 will be the deepest part of the facility below what will ultimately be the filter structure. That's package number 1, and it's scheduled for early fall. And then package number 2 is all of the primary process structures. So solids contact clarifiers, filter facility, and the chlorine contact basin. We're working on those now, and we'll have those fully designed in early spring of 2021. And those are in preparation for construction. One of the key things that we track how we track ourselves is through a progress curve. And so this curve represents phase 2A for now. And what you see is you see incremental periodic progress, but then you see the overall progress by the S curve. And so the light blue line, as you look at the graph itself, the light blue line is representative of the fastest we could go as a project. The darker blue line is our normal progression of the project, and the gray line is if we're starting to fall a little bit behind schedule. The black line is representative of our actual progress. And as you can see, the black line, or our actual progress, is right between what I would consider the normal progression and, I won't call it an accelerated, but an optimum progression with respect to, if we were to get too far ahead of our light blue line, we might get ahead of ourselves. So the black line to me represents a good trend. The project's got a good cadence. We've got the right momentum going through 2A and preparing for phase 2B, which is the final notice to proceed. And we're bringing the resources on at the right time. And as you can see by the table below, we're about 3% ahead of schedule on engineering. In construction, we're actually 16% ahead of schedule. And our composite progress is at 5.3% ahead of the overall schedule. So doing well from a timing and a progression standpoint. One of the key things that we really focus on, obviously, at this stage of the game is the regulatory elements around the project. And as you can see, KDHE, or Kansas Department of Health and Environment, we're spending a lot of time with them. Three of the key areas of focus over the last several months has been the findings of no significant impact. So the letter, the FONSI letter, as we call it, has been closed. It was a public comment period that expired on the 22nd of June. There were no comments. And so that period is closed, and we are officially released from a FONSI perspective. The basis of design report is the second element. That was submitted early in phase 2A. And the basis of design report, if you'll recall, is a comprehensive report of the process itself, the critical structures, the electrical infrastructure, all of the things that are going to be required to operate the facility. That was submitted, and it has been approved by KDHE. The third element, which has just been recently submitted, is the filter media pilot study. So one of the things that KDHE pays particularly close attention to is the filter media, that last barrier of the water treatment process before the water becomes quote unquote filtered water. And they're very interested in the type of media that we're using, the thickness of that media. And what we did is we ran a pilot study to prove out the design assumptions, and the pilot study came back and absolutely validated the rate of loading that we went in with the design on. So we have now submitted that to KDHE, and we expect favorable results there. And then last but not least, we've been working with the planning department, or not planning department, but building permits, going through the planning process with MABCD. And we've been working with them for several months. We just had our latest meeting a couple of weeks ago, very favorable. We've established a process for the valuation of the value of the permits, and then how we're going to incrementally submit for the building permit review and approval, and then ongoing inspections for the project. So again, it's been a very, very favorable set of meetings. Again, this is the site rendering. I won't spend any time on this. Alan talked about that a few moments ago. One of the things that you'll see in the next rendering update is we will actually start placing the admin facility over on the left-hand side of the building, of the facility where the storage units currently exist. So you'll see that in the next update. Next thing I'll talk to you about just briefly is the design. If you recall the last meeting, we really had just a bunch of blocks on the paper. There were some concepts that had been developed from a design standpoint. We've actually now begun putting those concepts into reality in the model itself. And so you can see that there is a lot of piping in between these structures. And to give you a sense of scale, as an example, some of this piping down here is 48 60-inch, 72 up to 84-inch. A lot of this is 48-inch pipe, so it's large piping. Again, to give you some sense of scale, one of these basins is 141 foot in diameter. So if you put two of these together, along with a piping corridor, it's longer than the length than a football field. So it's about the size of a football field. This entire complex is larger than 3 football fields. And then the filter facility is a very complex structure. And to give you a sense of scale on that one, here's where we are in the design on that part of the facility. So a lot of piping in. Once you take the lid off of the filter facility, look down upon it, and you see there's a lot of piping. The filter bays themselves, there's 16 of those, and the filter media that I spoke about just a moment ago that was subject of the pilot study, this is where that media would reside. And again, just to give you a sense of scale, this is from a length standpoint about almost a football field and a half long by about a football field wide. So again, a very large facility. So I want to introduce you now to Josh Cinderell. Josh Cinderell is our construction manager. He's already started on site, but he'll be on site full time once we mobilize. And Josh is going to talk to you a little bit about where we've been from a construction standpoint, where we are now, and then he's going to give you a sense of what the construction journey is going to look like over the next 3 to 4 years. So Josh?
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon, everyone. So as you can see on the slide, this is where it all started in February. And as many of you may remember, the site was well covered in vegetation and had been used for long-term storage for a variety of materials. The materials to be saved have been moved to the eastern area of the site near the old machine building, and the rest has been disposed of. Early on, when I visited the project, really for probably about the first time, I got to meet the Garver representatives, and I was made known that Element Biofuels in Colwich, Kansas had shown some interest in the biomass material on the project site. And from that early communication, we were able to put a plan together for the trees to be mulched up, which is what you see in the top right of the slide, and eventually used for renewable energy. And this early collaboration ended up in a win-win situation and has already been completed, and it's been able to keep all that material really out of the landfills. Next slide, please. So this photo is from our topsoil stripping and storage activities in late May, early June. And the inset photo is a boots on the ground photo from our mass excavation activities here in mid-June. In the main picture, you can also see that the sediment basin has been constructed adjacent to the pond. And the sediment basin is the centerpiece of our stormwater pollution prevention plan, and it is fully operational. Next slide. So the 4D BIM animation we're about to see is a culmination of integrating the BIM model with the project schedule. And by meshing these tools together, we're able to improve construction logistics by getting a better visual understanding of where we'll be working, how the project resources will be positioned, and how adjacent construction activities may impact one another. If you could start that, Dave. The brown covering moving across the project site is representative of the earthwork activities that have already commenced. And after the final notice to proceed is received this fall, Wichita Water Partners will be ready to send plans to KDHE for approval and start construction in the filter building in early 2021. By the summer of 2021, we're projected to be working in the filter building, solids contact clarifiers, and the chlorine contact basin. Our manpower requirements on the project will continue to increase until early 2023, when we're projected to top out at approximately 400 craft people on the project. By this time, all of the structures on the project site will be well underway, and many of them will be moving into functional testing, startup, and commissioning activities. In early 2024, all areas of the facility will be predominantly working through startup and commissioning activities as we march towards substantial completion. So the primary concern for all of our projects is to always send everyone home healthy. And this year with COVID-19, a new challenge developed. How do you protect everyone on the project site from a pandemic while at work when so much of our work requires our craftspeople to work closely with one another? Until now, most of the labor on the project has been in heavy equipment, and social distancing guidelines have been fairly easy to comply with. In addition to social distancing guidelines, we've developed a self-screening process that requires everyone visiting the project site to administer themselves. We started with a paper form that required everyone to answer 4 primary questions and submit it to our project superintendent to review. As long as you don't have any COVID symptoms, you haven't been exposed to a known or potential case of COVID-19, and you haven't come to the project from a hot zone, you're allowed to work on site. Within weeks of developing the first paper form, we were able to transition from paper to an app on your smartphone in order to further mitigate the potential spread and improve our ability to implement social distancing. The QR code that is shown will take you to the digital form by using the camera on your smartphone. As we move forward, additional PPE will be required. Face masks and or face shields will be required for everyone on site, and we've already implemented these requirements on other construction projects and we're prepared for this challenge. In addition, we've also implemented site disinfection procedures with the use of a disinfection fogging system that will be used in high-touch areas of the project site. All of these procedures have been established to keep everyone on the project safe and to work towards keeping our community safe. And for more about our community plans, I'm going to turn it over to Megan Jansen to give you an update on our community engagement efforts.
All right, thanks Josh. So while we haven't been able to be out in the community as much as we would like to, we've had to adjust our communications or outreach approach a little bit as well. We have been taking advantage of this time to grow our social media platforms and our digital presence, if you will, and are seeing a steady uptick in the level of engagement and also the number of folks that are following each of our channels. And in case you haven't had a chance to check it out, we are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, so encourage you to do that. It's been a lot of project progress and some basic information at this point, but as we approach the groundbreaking, we'll be able to ramp that up. We'll have a lot more to talk about, one of which will be all the opportunities for individuals and businesses on the project. And we are going to develop some tools such as a roadmap so that if you're an individual or a company, you can quickly and easily understand what's available to you, what makes sense, and what those steps are that you would need to take. One near-term exciting opportunity is our Wichita Entrepreneurship and Innovation Series, which we like to call the Dr. Fred program. That is going to be starting up in August. We're beginning to take enrollees, and I'm going to let the video do the talking. Thanks, Dave. Uh-oh. Dave, I don't think we have sound. Because you're muted, maybe, Dave?
All right.
Well, can I just tell you guys how many times we tested this?
Yeah, let's try this again. Sorry about that, guys. We had it down too, didn't we?
We did.
All right, let's try it again.
Hi, I'm Brandon Johnson, District 1 Council Member for the Wichita City Council, and I served on the steering committee for the Northwest Wichita Water Treatment Facility. And that project is a $500 million project, one of the biggest infrastructure projects in this region. And we wanted to make sure that everyone had access to be able to work and improve our city in that way. And this is one of those programs when we look at women and minority-owned businesses that can actually do that and expand our vendor base to get the work done. So I am excited to have Dr. Fred McKinney come back to Wichita. Mayor Whipple and I attended a kickoff event for the Wichita Entrepreneurship and Innovation Series, which was a great kickoff event, and we learned a lot about the expertise that Dr. Fred brings in his field. And he'll be back here starting in August. We'll be having 2-hour virtual sessions that are pretty intense, but definitely worth it because it helps benefit all of our businesses and opportunities. So thanks to these wonderful sponsors, the price has been greatly offset so that anyone who wants to attend can attend. We hope that local area businesses will participate so that everyone has a seat at the table, and you can click the link below to sign up and participate.
Great. And one of the great things about this program is it's open to any small business, not just businesses that may be able to perform services on the project. So it's a great opportunity. Thank you, Councilman Johnson, for stepping in and doing that for us. Did an excellent job. And I think I saw Don log on earlier. So Evergy sponsorship is really important. And as we roll this out tomorrow through all the social channels, anything you all can do to help us share and spread the word on that will be really helpful. Thanks. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Megan. And I'm just going to wrap this up by kind of giving a current conditions, kind of where we're at on the business opportunity component of the program and our commitment to the diversity and inclusion aspects of the project. And this is a very encouraging start. I mean, so far, we've engaged with 13 companies from the region, and that amounts to about $1 million in contract value. So we're off to a really good start. But that's what it is. It's just a start. This process is going to run from beginning to end and beyond. And with the help of KBS and CML, I'm confident that we'll have the same kind of success throughout the project. So I'm very optimistic and very pleased. A couple other things I wanted to talk about very briefly that are going on at the same time is the workforce development that we talked about. Because you heard Josh talk about the peak of construction and having over 400 trade workers on the site at that time. We need to make sure that this market can support and provide the number of construction, as well as for all the other projects that are so important to the economic development of the region. So that is something that's getting a lot of focus, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that a lot more in the future as well. And then the other aspect of it is the operator training component, because the success is going to absolutely be defined by making sure that we've got the right trained individuals, the right number of individuals to run this new plant when it's done. And that's a problem across the region, having adequate operator capacity or knowledge to make sure that projects and utilities are successful. So that's going to be something you'll be hearing more about in the future as well. And with that, Alan, we could take questions now, or okay, be glad to open it up for questions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Sure
Just
appreciate
real
it.
quick, you said we're going to come back to next set of plans that would show the admin building. How quickly would we see those laid in? I mean, obviously, we got a concept right now for the location, but have you all weighed in on that location? And are you comfortable with the way it's positioned, or are we going to see some variations of that?
Yeah, there's been preliminary discussion. Dave, would you like to weigh in on kind of the timeline for moving that component forward?
Yeah, sure. So the admin facility, we talked about package 1 and package 2. The admin facility is actually considered as part of package 3. However, now that the property acquisition is completed, over the next couple of months, we will actually start working with our architectural group, Schaefer Johnson, to start actually placing the building on the site. I would expect over the next couple of months, Councilman Fry, that we will have a rendering showing the administration facility on its new location.
And you're comfortable with the way it's laid out right now?
General concept, and we'll have some different options that we can lay out for you.
Okay. And do I understand correctly, we're going to have a groundbreaking maybe this fall? Would that
Yes.
be package 1, the filter?
Yes.
The groundbreaking is scheduled for October, I think, 22nd. Is that correct?
And that's the package
Correct.
1 area, the filters and so forth? That's
I
what I
believe
understood.
that it will be as we're beginning that work. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So let's get back to the, how do I get back to the PowerPoint? Escape. So, wanted to talk a little bit about the financial part of this project. The negotiations with EPA on the WIFIA contract have been completed, and the loan is actually closed, which is really good news. We got an extraordinary good interest rate of 1.17%. And those funds will be available starting in November in time for us to need them as they're associated with the expenditures on this project. So EPA and WIFIA are going along better than hoped, and the interest rates are very favorable, and we're going to be looking at the potential impact of that on future water rates, and that'll be folded into the rate discussion that we bring to council for consideration later this year. As far as the state revolving loan fund, that's administered through the state, KDHE. Those negotiations are ongoing right now. There was a few little hiccups at the beginning on trying to figure out exactly what this was going to look like, how it was going to be put out. And thank you, whoever did that. The negotiations seem to be on track and be going in the right direction. We're hoping that we're going to close those negotiations and have an actual contract towards the beginning of fall, September, October of this year, with funds available in the beginning of 2021. And when you consider the timing of WIFIA funding, that'll be just about perfect as far as the funds that are needed from the SRF. As you recall, roughly half of it is SRF, half of it is WIFIA. There is also some cash funding that we have accumulated that will go towards the project. So these are two very important financial funding tools. As far as the schedule, you already heard about that. Current phase 2A, or the limited notice to proceed. As you recall, there was the phase 2, which was, okay, now let's actually start construction. And we broke that construction into two pieces, a preliminary piece and a final notice to proceed, with taking advantage of the time before the WIFIA and SRF contracts were negotiated in full to be able to do some work. And there was some significant savings that Wichita Water Partners passed on to us by being able to start some of that work early, which is what we did. So as you saw, they've been continuing with design, the site and clearing and earthwork. It looks like a altogether different site now. And we will be looking at this limited notice to proceed schedule continues work into 2021. But we're looking at sometime in October for us to be considering the next phase of this project. The full notice to proceed November 2020. And we're looking at substantial completion anticipated for September 17, 2024, which is a fairly aggressive schedule when you consider the size and scope of this project. The admin lab building, substantial complete, will be 1 year earlier than that, which will be good because that'll help us with the testing and certification of the treatment plant. And Wichita Water Partners are full of good surprises. They may even be able to move us ahead on the schedule. You saw the progress report in their update with the black line, with them being ahead of schedule, but not irresponsibly ahead. We could very well see this project completing earlier, and that would be good. Every month or that we can complete earlier requires us to rely on the existing water treatment plant just that much shorter of amount of time. We do have a significant contingency in reserve in case we have to make repairs, but we have to remember that existing water treatment plant remains the sole source of water for the city while this plant is being constructed.
I'm sorry, could you go back to your last bullet point there? City staff concerns about earlier targets financial impact. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
So there's a couple of issues.
You might need to
Use
go
that
to the mic.
microphone if you'd like.
Oh, he's going to use that mic?
Is Mike?
Yeah.
So the two things that
Raise it up.
we're needing to verify as we're working with Wichita Water Partners on the schedule is when repayment starts on our loans. So if the substantial completion happens earlier, we have to start repaying sooner. That may affect when we have the funds available to start those repayments. And then Second part of it is if the funds will be available from WIFIA and SRF to pay Wichita Water Partners earlier. So that's the two issues that we have to work through.
When do we think we'll know the answer to those?
We're working on it now, but I mean, we'll know them before we do go to the final notice to proceed. Before we come back to council with the final notice to proceed and the SRF agreement, we'll know before then.
So Bill, I remember the conversation about this, and really it has an effect on how we would be able to make those payments and what effect it would have on a repayment schedule. But these aren't fatal flaws. This isn't a matter of us boxing ourselves into a corner where we can't make those payments. It would just affect the total cost of debt. So that's pretty much the presentation. I'd like to report that things are going well. And so, and the cooperation between city staff and Wichita Water Partners is very good. It's working out very well. And with that, is there anything Garver would like to add?
Just
I
gonna
mean,
ask.
they're kind of our outside set of eyes, independent. Do you have something you want to just add real quick?
Sure, thank you. I'm Chris Bone from Garver, and it's been a great process thus far. We continue to go through submittals, work with the Wichita Water Partners and City of Wichita addressing issues that come up. So it's been a very robust BIM model-driven review, which is something different, 3D model of the whole facility, which is kind of unique to see that as you work your way through the facility. And then the groundwork and such outside is more traditional 2D drawings. But it's been a good process thus far, and we've had good conversation, and we just like to see progression continue.
Yes, sir.
Since you're here, I just reminded me of the fly drone video that we saw at the beginning. Thank you for that, because
Oh, you're
that's a
welcome.
good aerial of what's been done. If you haven't been out to the site, you have the team has saved quite a few trees along Zoo Boulevard, and which helps shield it from the road, from traffic, and I hope we're able to keep that, because it does provide a nice buffer. So whoever did that, kudos, because it's hard to get a tree that size overnight. So.
Okay, any other concerns, questions, comments? Well, thank you so much for taking the time for being here, and for the folks that are on the virtual meeting, thank you for taking the time as well. That concludes the presentation.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.